Welcome once again to Let's Talk Marriage. This is Pastor Larry coming to you this Wednesday afternoon with Let's Talk Marriage. All right. Hope everyone is doing well. If you woke up this morning, you are doing well. All right, we're going to get right on into our program today. Our program today we're talking about growth in a marriage. When you first got married, there was the stage where you hit the honeymoon, and then after the honeymoon, reality began to set in. You know, you had the bills, you had the working, you had the time off, the working, the time off, and then later on you might have had children and things of that nature. But and as the years go by, you should not be in the same place spiritually, financially, and marital wise in your relationship. There should be some sort of growth in that relationship. You should be in a different place at this time as the years go on. There should be growth in the marriage. And because when there's no growth in the marriage, it's not going to go anywhere. And the things that take place a lot of times in today's society, why a lot of marriages fail is because there's no growth in a marriage. You can't expect your spouse to be the same as you were when you first got married. There's your characteristics don't change. But that's why it's important that you know each other before you walk down the aisle. And we've talked about it many times here on the program. Now, there should be some sort of, a lot of times there's no growth. Again, let me say this. There's no growth in our in marital relationships because there's no outlets for it. And, part of the growth in a marital relationship is, when you both are attending church, there should be, or you should be attending church with your spouse. And again, we've mentioned that on the program. If you're not attending, or if your spouse is not attending church, especially if you at one time were going to church together, or when you first met, you were going to church, and then all of a sudden, one of you stopped going to church, you need to find out why, what was the problem, and find out and look for a place where you both agreed to go to together. Now, in my case, my wife and I was at a church that I grew up in and I had been there, since I was a little kid. So when my wife and I got together, we naturally went to that church, and we grew within there. When we had our children, we were attending that church, and our children went to church as well. And you're wondering why there's so many things that are happening, with our young people. They're going downtown causing all kind of ruckus and things of that nature. That's because there's no family growth in society anymore. And part of the family growth years ago, and again, I would never say that. When I was coming up, everything was not perfect. There's no such thing as anything perfect. We had our issues and everything back then, but the thing that got us through and the thing that helped us be better citizens or be better people in the world was because our parents took us to church. Whether you had a mother or father, or whether there was a single parent, you went to church and you had that instilled in you, and that was part of your foundation. That's why you did not hear about kids back then doing things that they do now, because everyone went to church. And that's part of a family growth, that's part of a marital growth, that you both attend church together. And that's how you get your marriage to grow, by attending some sort of church. Again, if there's one party does not agree with the church that you're attending, make sure you sit down and talk about that, discuss that, and find a church that you can attend so you can grow and make sure you're taking your children to church as well. Because even, as they get older, they might even stop going to church when they get of age. But you know what? They'll have that instilled in them. They'll have that foundation, and when they decide to get married, have their own family, they'll know that's how they got to that point. So they'll attend church again and take their children to church. So that's part of growth in a marriage. And we have so many and there's marriages that are not growing, they're stagnant. And that's the same thing with our Christian relationships. Your Christian relationship, that's why Christ always compared marriage to the church. Because in your Christian relationship, you should not still be in the same place. You should have grown by now. You should have matured, and our marriages should mature. And the reason why a lot of them don't mature is because there's no outlets, and things are happening. There's so many things happening in the world. So there's nothing wrong with having things in your church or programs in your church to help keep the families together. Because you can just say that, oh, all they need is the word, but the word comes in several different forms. We have to realize that the word is presented in several different forms. Just like when you eat food, you don't eat the same thing all the time. There's a variety, but it still does the same thing. It's still nutritious. So you have to make sure that there's in a variety or some sort of programs to help keep these families, these marriages stimulated, so there is growth within the marriage, and you'll continue to grow in the marriage. And when we have growth in the marriage, that's what keeps the churches together, because there's the family bond. That's what keeps churches together, is the family bond, the growth in there. They invite another family, and then before you know, you have several families in your church, and that's what keeps our church together. If you don't have any marriage counseling programs in your church, partner up with a church where they do have it, and you can attend it, especially when you find that your marriage is not growing. Find a couple that have been married for a long time, and sit down and talk with them and find out what their secret is, because they have the formula. If they've been married a long time, they have that formula. Especially if you have parents that were married a long time, they have the formula that keeps a marriage together, that helps a marriage to grow. Here are some things here that I found that's part of a marriage, having a marriage grow. You should share a strong emotional connection with each other. Be vulnerable without fear of judgment. You don't judge each other of different things. You always support each other. You feel comfortable in silence together. You don't always have to be talking. You can just sit in a room and enjoy each other's company. Each other without hesitation. You trust each other without hesitation. There's no hesitation that you trust them. You feel secure in your relationship. You're not worried about them going anywhere. You're not worried about them cheating on you. And a lot of times these things are worried about or thought about is because there's chapters in your life that was not closed before you got into another relationship. That's what another thing that stuns the growth in a marriage, when you come from a previous marriage where there's no where you have not closed those chapters. You didn't get any counseling, you didn't seek any help before you moved on to another relationship. You can't divorce a person one day and then jump into another relationship the next day. You have to allow yourself time to heal before you go into another relationship, because if you don't, you're going to bring something from that previous relationship. Say, for instance, you were in that relationship and that person cheated on you, several times, different times. You always had to keep an eye on them around women, or keep an eye on her around men, because there was no trust there. When you go into the next relationship, you're going to be looking for the same thing, or keeping an eye on that person for the same thing, and it might not even be there. But because you did not close that chapter in your previous relationship, that's what happened, and it stuns the growth in our marriage. And there's nothing wrong with, and a lot of times people get married for the wrong reasons. Make sure you wait, wait for your soulmate. And that's where singles ministry comes into play in churches. A lot of churches don't, they don't like to have programs, but there's nothing wrong with programs. When you were in school, there was always programs. You didn't stay in one classroom all day long. You went to several different things. They touched on several different subjects in each one of those classrooms. And that's the same thing in a church. You have to have something, a singles ministry where you train people how to be single, how to abstain from infidelity. You train them for that. They're trained and taught that. You can read it all day in the Word, but until it's entered into your heart, where you instill this into them, just like you train your children, you instill things in them. And that's where singles ministry, I was in a church where we had singles ministry, and we sat down, they sat down and they taught us what to look for when you were interested in a person, how to be with that person without, involving in things that weren't scriptural. So they taught us those things. And that's where that would come in at. And a lot of times those things are missed, and people go out and marry folks that they don't know anything about. That's where singles ministry is. They teach you what to look for in a person. If you're thinking about walking down the aisle with them, they teach you what to look for in those people. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with having marital seminars in your church. There's nothing wrong with having that, or have someone come in and speak to the married couples, because sometimes you might get stagnant without even knowing it. You're in the same place and you're not growing or moving along. But if you listen to each other and trust each other, there will always be growth. You'll move to the next level in your relationships. Here's another one. Show physical affection. When you have that right person, when that's your soulmate, there should not be a problem. The Bible said the bed is undefiled. So you make sure you have that physical affection with each other. There's nothing wrong with that. It's scriptural, and you should have that strong relationship with your spouse. Not, you had it when you first got married during the honeymoon, and after that, nothing. It shouldn't be the case. All right. You should respect each other. You should look out for each other. You should have each other's back. There shouldn't be a point where you do something, your wife is not supporting you, or the husband is not supporting you. You should respect each other. Here's another one. You should exhibit unwavering commitment. Just like you have unwavering commitment with Christ, you should have unwavering commitment between the both of you in your marriage. You should be totally committed to each other. There's no distractions in your marriage. There's no third parties in your marriage. You're totally committed to each other. Just like when you're committed, and when you became a Christian, you became unwaveringly committed to Christ. You should be unwaveringly committed to your spouse. All right. Communicate openly. When you communicate openly, and sometimes there's something that should be practiced. When you communicate openly, it's something that should be practiced, because no one is a perfect communicator. That's how you practice on becoming a perfect communicator. And that's how you practice communicating openly. And one of the ways you communicate openly is learning to listen. And sometimes it's a hard thing when you're trying to get a point across. You're trying to get your point across. They're trying to get their point across. And no one is listening to each other. And that's how you have confrontations, that's how you have arguments. So we have to learn, in order for our relationships to grow, we have to trust each other. And again, I mentioned that one of the ways in order for our relationship to grow is to both attend church. And again, I said it before, we took our children to church. That's why that was the difference between the children back in the day and the children. Not that the parents were perfect, again. That's the difference. We took our children to church back then. That's why they became better citizens, they became better adults. And the children nowadays, with things on the internet, people don't feel like they have to physically go to church. But if you're trying to go to church on the internet, your whole family's not going to be looking at that. You might look at it for 10 to 15 minutes, and there's always going to be some distraction if you're trying to watch church on TV. It might even be your own church that having live streaming. You're not, everybody in the whole family is not going to sit down in front of the TV. Just like the same thing when you all watch a movie. How many times the whole family sat down and watch a movie? Because most people like something different. Your husband might want to watch sports. You might want to watch Lifetime. The kids might want to watch cartoons. There's always something different. So 9 out of 10 times, you're not all going to sit down and in front of the TV and watch a streaming service. That's why you have to physically get up, get dressed, and go out to church. You make it a day. And that's part of growth in a marriage. You have that program on Sunday, we all going to church. Even if you don't go during the week, you're all going on Sunday. And that's part of what helps a marriage to grow. That you both attending church, they help your family to grow, they help your children to grow. Okay, here is another one. You are the best of friends. That's how your marriage grow. That's another way that helps your marriage to grow, when you are the best of friends. And when you're the best of friends, you know how to share things together. You know how to speak things together. You have twined spirits that are joined together, and you become one. That's why you have to make sure you marry your soulmate, and that's why you have to make sure you're wait on your soulmate. Don't just marry anyone, because if you marry anyone, there's not going to be any growth in that relationship. And when you marry someone, there should be some growth. You should be at a level. You should start here and be at the next level as the years go by. Your bond should be stronger, because when you have a rope and you add more twine and more twine to that rope, it can start as a single strand. But if you keep adding twine to that, it's going to get stronger and stronger. That's how your relationship grows. It started out as a single strand with two people tying that knot. That's why they call it tying a knot. You tie that knot together. And as that knot, as tension goes on that knot, tensions of life, tension of things that happen in life, you constantly adding strands to that. So when the tension pulls, that bond becomes stronger and stronger, and that's how you grow in a marriage. And these things should be taught in the churches, and a lot of times they're not taught in the churches. They just tell your husband love your wife as Christ loved, but sometimes you have to physically teach someone. Just like when you were in school, they can tell you about algebra and all the things that trigonometry and all the things it does and what it's used for, but until it's taught, nobody's going to get it. That's why a lot of times you didn't get math when you were in school. You're like, okay, what am I going to use this for? What good is this going to do me? Because I know a lot of times especially when you're in school and as you get older and you move past 1 + 1 is 2. Wait a minute. Yeah, 1 + 1 is 2. But you move past 1 + 1 is 2, and you start getting into the more detailed math, and you don't realize that all those numbers are used for something in our everyday life. Just like fractions, when you're cooking or when you're building a house, you have to know fractions when you're measuring things. That's how you get a window perfectly set in a house. Because if you didn't know math, that window could be on one side, and the other window on the other side. The door could be lopsided, the floor uneven. So that's how you build, and that's how your marriage grow. You put all those things together, and there's growth in a marriage. That's why they need to be taught in our churches, and a lot of times couples don't attend church together because they're not getting anything out of it. And we have to make sure that we are putting something in there or offering them nothing. Again, I say it, and I constantly say it, and a lot of people don't, a lot of churches don't agree. There's nothing wrong with having programs, because when you have programs, what you're doing is you're presenting the Word of God in several different avenues. That's what a program does. Like if you have a marital program or marriage counseling, marriage seminars, and things like that, you're going into details what the Bible talks about marriage, and you're going into details how to live. And when you have singles ministry, you're going into details about what the Word of God says about being abstinence. You're going into details. You're training people in the church how to do that, what to look for, what not to look for. That's why when we were coming up, these are the things that they did in our church. When you wanted to, you were interested in someone, when you were of age, you went out with them, you dated with them, but you went in groups. You didn't go alone. You went in groups. You always went with a matured married couple. You went with them, especially if you were contemplating getting married with that person. That's how you would get to know them. So that way, because when you train, or when two people are trained, I don't care, they will not be tempted like people that are not trained. If you tell them what to look for, what not to do, it's instilled in them. They won't. That's why it will not depart from them, and that's why we have to have this in our churches in order for the church to grow. Because what will happen is, if you don't have that in your church, what are they going to do? They're going to go outside of the church, find some knucklehead, and then try to bring him back to church. And next thing you know, they're in a relationship where the husband don't go to church, and it might get physical. He might be abusing her, or they find out something about that person because they never got a chance to know that person. That's where those ministries come in. You go into detail what to look for. That's how you when women realize that they have their Boaz, that's when their Boaz is there, because they are trained to know what to look for. And that's what single ministries does. It teaches the women how to carry themselves. And we used to have the mothers. They would come and talk to the young. That's what it was. It was singles ministry. That's what the mothers did in the churches. They talked to the young women. So that's why when they got in their relationships and when they got married, they knew how to make that marriage flourish. They knew how to make that marriage grow. And that's why you became best of friends, because you want that marriage to grow. You're going to share an amazing sexual chemistry between each other. And that's, the Bible says the bed is undefiled. So you have to give each other your all and all. You have to share each other. Just go crazy with each other. That's your husband. That's your wife. Love on them. Just love on them, love on them, love on them. All right. Moving right along. You give them your undivided attention. They're not going to be talking to you and your mind is all over the place. And they trying to tell you something, you're not listening. That's where our kids come in at. They see you doing it. If they see mama sitting there talking to dad and he half listening to them, guess what? When you start talking to them, they're going to be half listening to you. That's how your family grows. When the kids see how attentive the mother and father is between each other, then they become attentive to their parents. When they go to school, they become attentive to their teachers. They become attentive to their Sunday school teacher as well. And that's how they learn, and that's how your family grows. This is Pastor Larry. I'm going to be signing off. with Let's Talk Marriage. Until we meet again, remember, keep the growth in your marriage and continue to grow in your relationships. This is Pastor Larry. Until we meet again with Let's Talk Marriage. All right. Remember, if you are not attending a church, please, please, please find a church to attend. This is Pastor Larry. I'm going to be signing off again until we meet again with Let's Talk Marriage.